I've always been a night owl. Something about staying up late, watching movies alone in the dark, and getting lost in the glow of my screen has always felt comforting. It's been my routine for years. Popcorn, a blanket, and endless scrolling through Netflix until I settle on something that fits my mood. But after what happened last month, I don't think I'll ever watch Netflix at night again. It started on a Saturday. My roommate, Jake, had gone to visit his girlfriend for the weekend, leaving me alone in our apartment. I wasn't complaining. I actually liked having the place to myself. I ordered takeout, grabbed a few beers, and set up for a long night of horror movies. The first few hours were normal. I watched The Conjuring, then Hereditary, and was halfway through Sinister when I started feeling that weird sensation you get when someone's watching you. You know the feeling, like the air in the room suddenly shifts, like there's an extra presence lurking just beyond your vision. I chalked it up to paranoia. Watching horror movies alone in the dark was bound to mess with my head. But then something weird happened. Netflix suddenly paused. I frowned, assuming my internet had glitched, but when I reached for the remote, I realized it wasn't even near me. It was on the coffee table, a few feet away. Okay, I muttered. Weird, but whatever. I hit play and tried to brush it off. A few minutes later, it happened again. The movie stopped, this time rewinding a full 30 seconds before pausing. Now I was getting irritated. Stupid Wi-Fi, I grumbled, grabbing the remote to fix it. But before I could press anything, the cursor on the screen moved by itself. I froze. The little red line scrolled through the movie's timeline, flickering as if someone was fast-forwarding and rewinding at the same time. I stared, gripping the remote, but my fingers weren't even on the buttons. Then the movie switched. Not by me. The screen cut to black for a second, then loaded a different title. It wasn't something in my watch history. It wasn't even a movie. It was a live stream. The title read, "Watching You." A deep chill crawled up my spine as the screen faded in. The video was grainy and distorted, like it was being filmed on an old security camera. The angle showed my apartment, specifically me, sitting on the couch. I shot up so fast I knocked over my drink. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. It was a perfect view of my living room, showing the back of my head, the TV in front of me, and the faint glow from the kitchen light behind me. This had to be a sick joke. I spun around, searching the room, but there was no camera, nothing that could be filming me. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone and started dialing Jake. Before I could hit call, a chat box appeared on the screen. Anonymous. "Sit back down." I dropped my phone. The text disappeared and the video zoomed in, closer to me. I backed away, my mind racing. Was this a prank? A hacked feed? My breathing turned shallow. I reached for the remote to exit Netflix, but the screen glitched and switched again. Now the camera feed had changed. It wasn't showing my living room anymore. It was showing my bedroom. The camera was positioned in the far corner, giving a wide-angle view of my unmade bed, my desk, and my closet. The closet door was slightly open, and something was moving inside. I couldn't breathe. A dark shape shifted behind the door, just barely visible in the dim light. A figure, standing, waiting. I grabbed the nearest object, a beer bottle, and held it like a weapon as I slowly moved toward my bedroom. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I had to know. I had to see if someone was really there. I reached the doorframe and hesitated. The closet door was open wider now, not by much, maybe an inch, but enough. Enough to see the edge of a pale hand. My body went cold. And then, a notification popped up on the TV. Anonymous. "You shouldn't have gotten up." I didn't wait. I ran. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and bolted out of my apartment, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. I sprinted down the hallway, heart pounding, and didn't stop until I was outside in the parking lot. I didn't go back inside that night. Instead, I drove to Jake's girlfriend's place and crashed on their couch, shaking and trying to convince myself that I had imagined it. But when I checked my phone the next morning, there was a single notification from Netflix. Continue watching. Watching you. I moved out 2 weeks later, and I haven't used Netflix since. It all started on a Friday night. I had just finished a long week at work and was looking forward to a quiet night of Netflix and takeout. I lived alone in a small apartment complex. Nothing fancy, but it was comfortable. The kind of place where you barely knew your neighbors, except for the occasional awkward nod in the hallway. I ordered some Chinese food, changed into my sweatpants, and settled onto the couch with my laptop. I didn't have a smart TV, so I just streamed Netflix on my laptop like I always did. The night was supposed to be completely uneventful. Just me, my food, and a mindless horror movie playing in the background. About halfway through the movie, my Wi-Fi started acting up. The video began buffering, and then Netflix logged me out. Annoying, but not a big deal. I assumed my internet was just being slow, so I closed the laptop, restarted my router, and went to grab a drink while it reset. When I came back, I reopened Netflix and started logging back in. But when I typed in my email, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Incorrect password. That was weird. I knew my password. I'd used it for years. I tried again, making sure I wasn't mistyping anything, but it still didn't work. Confused, I clicked on Forgot Password and checked my email. There was already an email from Netflix. Your password was successfully changed. I didn't change it. My heart started pounding. Who the hell was messing with my account? I immediately reset the password and signed back in. Everything looked normal, my recently watched list, my recommendations. But then I noticed something strange. There was a new profile on my account. It was simply named ... I stared at the screen, my mouth going dry. I had never added that profile. I hovered over it, hesitating, then finally clicked on it. There was only one show in the Continue Watching section, a live-action home security feed. My blood turned ice cold. I clicked on it, and the screen filled with grainy black and white footage of a dimly lit apartment. At first, I didn't recognize it, but as the camera slowly panned across the room, my stomach dropped. It was my apartment. I could see my couch, my coffee table, my half-empty takeout container sitting there. And then the camera stopped moving, pointing directly at me. I was watching myself in real time. A deep chill ran down my spine. My breathing became shallow and my hands trembled as I slowly looked around my living room. There was no camera that I could see. No blinking red light. Nothing that should be filming me. I slammed my laptop shut and stood up so fast I nearly tripped. Every shadow in my apartment suddenly felt sinister. Was someone inside? I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. As it rang, I crept toward my bedroom, my heart hammering in my chest. My apartment was small, just one bedroom, one bathroom. There weren't many places someone could hide, but as I passed by my front door, something made me stop. The chain lock was unhooked. I never left it unhooked. A wave of nausea hit me as the realization sank in. Someone had been inside. Maybe they still were. My phone finally connected, and I whispered frantically to the dispatcher that someone had broken into my apartment. She told me to stay on the line and get somewhere safe. The only place that felt remotely safe was my bathroom. I rushed inside, locked the door, and crouched in the tub, my phone pressed against my ear. I stayed like that, barely breathing, until I heard sirens outside. Moments later, there was a loud knock at my door. "This is the police. Open up!" I hesitated for only a second before bolting out of the bathroom and yanking the door open. Two officers stood there, their hands on their holsters, scanning my apartment with sharp eyes. They searched the whole place. No sign of forced entry, no hidden cameras. Nothing but the chain lock. I knew I hadn't unhooked it. The police took my statement and advised me to stay somewhere else for the night. I packed a bag and went to crash at my friend's place. When I checked my Netflix account the next morning, the strange profile was gone. I changed all my passwords, set up new security measures. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that someone was watching me that night. Maybe they still are. And the worst part? I never found the camera. This happened years ago. I was dating a girl for the first time. Her name was Scarlett. We never really went out and did stuff together, though we would basically just stay over at each other's places and Netflix and chill. I wasn't really into anything at the time, so I usually let Scarlett pick what we watched. Her thing was true crime documentaries, which I wasn't the biggest fan of. It was her absolute favorite kind of show, though, so I let her have what she wanted. However, the way Scarlett consumed that stuff always struck me as a lot when they showed pictures of the bodies. Sometimes she'd even say, "Wow," in a way that made it seem like she kind of thought it was cool. Even the way she rooted for the killers was bizarre as hell. One night, we watched this one documentary called Don't F with Cats. It was about this guy named Luca Magnat, who started off by taking out kittens and posting videos of it online, and then went on to do the same thing to a person. While people on the internet were trying to catch him, it turned into this whole global manhunt. Before he was finally arrested, it didn't really come off. As a surprise, when Scarlett got way more into it than ever before, she laughed and smiled through the whole thing. I wish I hadn't forgotten about it, because we literally adopted a cat together. A few weeks later, it was this adorable little dumpster kitty that was abandoned near my place. We shared custody of him, trading him off every weekend. We had him for a couple of months before something happened. One night in the middle of the week in which I didn't have the cat, I awoke to a hand over my mouth. I freaked out and almost screamed, but I quickly recognized that it was Scarlett in my room. "Scarlett, what the hell are you doing in here? How'd you get in?" "You always leave your window unlocked. I just crawled in. Listen, I got to tell you something, but you need to keep it a secret, okay? Yeah, sure. What is it?" "So I went out tonight and I did." "You cheat on me." "No, I know." "Oh man, I can't believe I actually did this." What did you do?" I just killed somebody." "What is this? A joke?" "Nope. It's real. I just snuck up on some random guy and knocked him out. Then I strangled him and threw him in the river. Isn't that crazy? Tell me you're making this up. I'm not dating a murderer. If you did this, I'm snitching and calling the cops." "No, don't do that. Then I'll have to kill you too. Okay? Okay. I won't say anything. You're scaring me. Scar, please, just let me leave. I'm just going to forget that you said anything. Okay? Fine, I'll go. Just see you next Friday for some more Netflix and scissor. I mean, Netflix and chill. Until then, sweet dreams." I didn't know what to do except pretend the whole encounter was a weird nightmare from all the crime documentaries. I couldn't sleep after that, and it was so late in the night that it was basically early morning, so I just got up. There were 2 more days until I was set to meet Scarlett at her place. Again, I ghosted her the whole time, and it just felt easier to act like I didn't have a girlfriend until I could forget about it. I made sure to keep my doors and windows locked up from there on out. I passed out on Wednesday night, and I woke up to a bunch of texts from Scarlett. She was saying she had something to show me. She wanted to wait until I came over on Friday, but she just couldn't hold on to it. Then she said, "Sent me a video. I'll never unsee it. Started with Scarlett, putting our cat into a blender." He struggled against her, trying to get away, but she managed to shove him in it and put the lid on. He was meowing in distress like I'd never heard him. I was so confused as to what Scarlett was doing, but then she turned on the blender. I couldn't contain myself. Half of me wanted to shove Scarlett's face into the blender, but the other half could do nothing more but break down completely. I went to the police as soon as I could and showed them the video, then gave them Scarlett's address. They arrested her immediately, but it soon turned out that she was never lying about taking out a random man. The cat was just her warm-up, which meant our cat had already been deceased for days. Scarlett was sent to prison, and it's not expected that she'll ever come out. I've never gotten over what she did to our cat. My cat, and with a smile on her face, she's a monster. And every time I see a blender, a cat, someone that vaguely looks like her, or think about watching Netflix, everything comes rushing back to me, and that video just plays in my head. It's terrifying to think a Netflix show could inspire anyone to do such awful things. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a 25-year-old trans sadistic killer named Scarlett Blake, who was so confident she had gotten away with the perfect slang that she couldn't help but boast about it. That led her to finally being caught and now facing a life sentence in prison. Blake filmed herself torturing a neighbor's cat and putting it into a blender to make matters worse. Blake's rampage didn't just stop there. She was also accused of taking out a random stranger named Jorge Martin Carreno, having targeted him as he sat alone in the early hours of the morning in the park. Blake had smashed the vodka bottle over his head, then strangled him as he lay dazed and pushed him into a river to drown Blake, then took trophy photos at the spot of where she took out the victim and sent them to her partner, Ashlyn Bell, a fellow trans woman. Police believe Blake would have gotten away with the crime had she not later had a bitter falling out with Bell, who then contacted detectives at Thames Valley Police. It was only then, almost 2 years later after Jorge's death, that police finally learned of Blake's gruesome obsession with death and how she had warmed up for her attack on him by making a 4-hour video of herself slaughtering a neighbor's cat. Blake had allegedly been inspired by the Netflix documentary Don't EF with Cats, which charted the progress of Canadian misfit Luca Magota from taking out pets and then eventually a human victim. Blake was then arrested and charged accordingly. I honestly thought I'd never get a date with a half-decent girl for the rest of my life. I might be fat as hell in losing my hair, so I held out for a hot chick for a long time, or even a soft 6 at least. But then, one day, a miracle happened. I matched with this super hot girl named, well, I guess I shouldn't mention her name. I'll just call her Ara. I always wanted to bang Ara. I didn't get my hopes up at first, as I figured it had to be another catfish. But the more we talked, the more I knew it wasn't. Texts turned to phone calls, and then FaceTime. That's when I was 100% sure this girl was real. Sarah wanted me to come over to her place for a Netflix and chill date when she told me that I just about had to change my underwear right then and there. Zrania. But then at last came the catch. Not only did she want me to bring food and liquor for the night, but also a grocery list of narcotics. The only problem was I had no idea how to source half of that stuff. It took me a few days of asking around at dive bars and calling up old friends who I knew had gotten hooked on stuff in the past. But then I finally had everything together. Sarah sent me her address and I called up in Uber XL to make sure I got there safely. The entire way there I was nervous as hell, not only because of the anticipation of getting with a hot chick, but also because of the bag of felonies I was in possession of. I just kept telling myself it was going to be worth it when I finally saw Sarah in person. She was even hotter than her pictures, and what she was wearing made her intentions clear. She invited me inside and told me to sit on the couch. Almost immediately, she curled up on me. She clearly knew her way around very large men, and I figured this wasn't her first time using a fat incel like me to get her fix. After a few minutes, we decided on what to watch. As we spooned, I handed her the bag of stuff, and she left me on the couch watching Netflix while she went into the bathroom to do all the stuff. After a few minutes, she eventually came out, but I had to do a double take. It was like she had been replaced with some cracked-out look-alike from off the street. Her face, and especially her eyes, looked so different, but the rest of her was still hot. I had to get in that and end my years-long drought. Sarah was stumbling around as she led me to her bedroom, as opposed to what I expected, given how much smaller she was than me. She flopped down on the bed and told me to get on top of her. I didn't know what else to do but to listen to her, so I did what she requested and jumped on top of her with my arms and legs out. That's when things got freaky, and actually, I'll spare the details. I didn't last long at all. When I looked down at Sarah's face to apologize, I realized she was completely passed out. Her eyes were wide open as well as her mouth. I thought maybe it was just a combination of everything she took, but then blood started pouring out of her nose. I panicked, convinced that I had, squished her in my excitement and crushed her rib cage or even her windpipe. I called 911, hoping that someone could save her, but unfortunately, they couldn't. The scene the cops arrived at looked pretty damning for me, so they arrested me. However, after some investigating, they let me go. They couldn't prove I put any of that stuff into her system. Sarah's family has remained suspicious of me. They think I'm a killer and took her out. I agree. I'm not the good guy in this situation, but I'm not a murderer. I'm just a typical desperate fat slob who tried to get his whistle wet. But now, I'm traumatized by the thought of a Netflix and chill date. So I guess that's out the window for me. This story was inspired by a disturbing incident that happened on December 11th of 2021. A woman named Lauren Smith Fields invited a man she met on Bumble 37-year-old engineer Matthew L.F. Fountain over for a Netflix and chill date. The two drank tequila and watched a movie before falling asleep. That's when bloody sheets and a male fluid-filled rubber was found at the scene. In the morning, LaFountain says he found an unresponsive Smith Fields with a bloody nose and called 911. Lauren Smith Fields' family believed that she was rude and passed away at the hands of LaFountain. The medical examiner says Lauren passed due to a fatal combination of narcotics and alcohol. Police have shared their opinion that there is no foul play involved, but haven't shared what evidence they found to rule it out. Lauren's family say this is because her demise was inadequately investigated. Police have asked Lauren's family to stop calling the police station. Police told Lauren's family the Bumble date was a nice guy. Police told Lauren's family there is no need to investigate him. Lauren's family lawyer said it looks more like a murder, and if the police don't start acting fast, we're going to have a real big problem on our hands. The family plans to file a lawsuit against the city, shrouded in accusations of police neglect and cover-up. We'll probably never know what really happened to the 23-year-old. I lived with my boyfriend of 12 years and my son who's 34 years old. His father left us when he was little, leaving me to raise him on my own. I met my boyfriend Jack soon after my son Paul left home after graduating college. Everything was fine for a long time, but around the time my son turned 30, he started to change. He started slowly deteriorating into a helpless, paranoid wreck and thinks everyone is out to get him. He lost his job, girlfriend, apartment, and everything he owned because of whatever's wrong with his head. Seeing his mental illness from afar was much different than living with it. Behavior-wise, Paul had almost regressed back to the toddler stage, except he was a fully grown man. It was honestly sad to see, but there wasn't much I could do about it. Paul essentially took our lives down with his constant freakouts and tantrums caused me and Jack immense stress. The two of us had been living together for several years by then, and we had grown accustomed to being freely intimate and always Netflix and chilling. But eventually, all that went out the window when Paul moved back in. Jack and I could rarely have any time alone, as Paul would quickly become convinced that we were secretly conspiring against him. "I know what you little shits want me out of here, and I'm not leaving you." Got that? We eventually got worried that Paul might someday do something more serious or violent, which is why Jack decided to get Paul to see a psychiatrist. We eventually convinced him to go, and the doctors later revealed Paul was in fact sick in the head and needed psychiatric treatment. They said he was a paranoid schizophrenic in need of inpatient care lasting anywhere from a week to several months. He claimed we just wanted to abandon him and started acting like a violent lunatic, kicking and punching and cracking the back seat. Windows when we got home, Paul locked himself in his room for the entire day. Jack and I didn't bother him. We locked ourselves in our room too and laid in bed together. We put Netflix on to our favorite brain-dead distraction show just to numb our brains from the craziness. I guess we both needed the stress relief. We exhausted ourselves and passed out earlier than usual, still somehow not being disturbed by Paul. After sleeping for some time, I remember waking up to Paul in his underwear, standing in the room with the knife in his hand. "Paul, what are you doing? Put down the knife." "Shut up. I know what you idiots have been up to it. Smells like in here. What are you talking about? He's been controlling me. Controlling us. I can't take it anymore. He's not controlling anyone. We're just trying to help you." "Lie, that's what he wants you to think. The next thing you know, he's going to put you in there too." "Paul, please put down the knife. Let's just talk about this." "I'm not going back. I'm not going back. I'm not going back. What's going on? Am I still getting my rim lit?" "Paul, is that you? I'm not going back in one moment." My life was destroyed. I panicked and ran out of the bedroom before Paul could do anything to me. Then I locked myself in the bathroom. Just seconds later, he started banging on the door, stabbing through it and trying to get in. "Fall, stop. We're free, Mommy. I did it, we're free now. Me and you can Netflix in jail, and you don't have to do it with that dirty slob." I could hear him from the bathrobe, jumping around with glee, screaming and blabbering nonsense. For some reason, he kept shouting our postcode, and now it rings in my head anytime I write down my address. CR85 and YKR85 and YKR85 and Y. That lunatic went running out onto the street. For some reason, he kept shouting out our postcode, and it rings in my head anytime I write down my address. I eventually gathered myself enough to crawl out of the bathroom and get my phone. I called the police on my own. Son, something I never thought I would have to do. They arrested him in his underwear, taking the bloody knife he had been waving around in celebration. Jack did not survive when questioned. Paul admitted to having taken out Jack, believing wholeheartedly that Jack had been controlling his mind. He's serving his sentence in a psychiatric hospital, but I have never visited him. He may be my son, but he's become a monster. I can never forgive him for the brutality of taking out Jack, the man who made my life worth living again, now taken away from me too soon. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a paranoid schizophrenic man who took out his mother's partner with a knife while the couple was Netflixing, chilling in bed. Together, 34-year-old Nicholas Jones took out 45-year-old Paul McCarroll at the family home in Oaks Road, Kenley, South London. The victim had been in a relationship with Jones' mother for around 12 years before the slaying. They were lying in bed together, allegedly Netflix and chilling, when Jones stormed into the bedroom with a blade and did what he did to Mr. Carroll shortly before 6 p.m., despite the best efforts of police and paramedics. Mr. Carroll was unable to be revived. Jones appeared at court via video link from a psychiatric hospital to deny the slaying, but later admitted to it. The prosecution accepted his plea. A prosecutor mentioned Jones had a working diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia and had spoken of hearing voices before the attack. He said Jones was known to mental health services and thought to be suffering from a serious psychiatric illness. Less than a month before this incident, those treating him called police because he threatened to burn down their offices because he believed he had been misdiagnosed. The court heard that after the slaying, Jones was topless and shoeless in the street, shouting out his postcode and saying in his words he had effed up. As a result, the attack was said to be motiveless. The judge ultimately ordered a psychiatric report to be prepared from the clinician at the hospital where Jones currently is and adjourned sentence until September 27th.